Okay, so it is currently 6 p.m. Toronto time. We will now begin our program. So good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine Dimalanta, and I will be your moderator for today. I would like to welcome all of our guests and our participants to our virtual post-arrival orientation seminar on credentials recognition and settlement services. So this webinar is brought to you by the Philippine Consulate General and the Philippine Overseas Labor Office here in Toronto. And I would just like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Philippine Embassy in Ottawa, Ambassador Rodolfo D. Robles, as well as the Consul General of the Philippine Consulate General here in Toronto, Conjen Orontes V. Castro. And we also have the head of Polo Toronto, Labor Attaché Rachel Zazabrado Nagayo, and all our colleagues from the Philippine Embassy, the PCG, and Polo in Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver. I would also like to introduce and thank all of our speakers for being here today. We have Attorney Maria Dina P. Santos from the Santos Law Office, as well as Ms. Connie Manzo from the Welcome Center Immigrant Services, and Mr. Rodolfo Lastimosa Jr., who is a registered practical nurse and a member of the Council of the College of Nurses of Ontario. And last but not least, we have all our OFWs in attendance today as well. So thank you all again for joining us this evening. Now I would like to mention that this post-arrival orientation seminar is being recorded and it will be posted on the PCG's Facebook page after the webinar. And this ensures that the information and services we will be discussing this evening remains available to the Filipino workers who are unable to join us today. So to officially begin our seminar, I would like to invite Consul General Orontes V. Castro to introduce.
Thank you very much, Sir. Mga minamahal na kababayan, esteemed guests, colleague in the Philippine Foreign Service, magandang gabi, magandang tanghali, at magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I am always honored and privileged every time I introduce this great man, our guest of honor, because he is of excellent academic and professional achievements. With the following: first place in the 1967 Philippine Bar Examinations after graduating with I Honors, a Master of Laws from the Harvard University, founder and senior partner of a law firm, co-founded and became among the youngest law dean of the biggest law school in the Philippines today, the Arellano Law School in the Philippines. He was among the youngest elected delegate to the 1971 Philippine Constitutional Convention. He is also the famous author of the Ombudsman and the Miranda Doctrine in the 1972 Philippine Constitution. Because of excellent achievements in the field of law, our guest of honor was one of the awardees of the prestigious 10 Outstanding Young Men, or TOYM, by the Philippine JCs. In 1980, he established and led as president and chairman of the board the successful business venture called Rudnor Capital Corporation and Brentwood Realty and Development Corporation. I know you are all eager like me to meet and hear from our esteemed guest tonight. Mga minamahal na kababayan, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Ambassador Rodolfo Diaz Robles.
Napakaraming beses mo na ako ini-introduce, kaya maraming salamat. Anyway, my dear colleagues in government, mga kababayan, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. I congratulate the Consulate General and the Labor Office in Toronto for organizing this virtual post-arrival orientation seminar in line with our commitment to assist newly arrived Filipino immigrants and temporary foreign workers transition into their environment here in Canada. Conducting a seminar like this is likewise included in the plan of action for our credentials recognition in Canada, or CRC. The academic credentials and overseas work experience of immigrants to Canada are often not recognized by provincial governments across Canada. This prevents their full contribution to the development of their new communities in Canada. Incidentally, I am aware of only one reciprocal recognition arrangement between France and the province of Quebec. Filipino nurses arriving in Canada continue to face this challenge on credentials recognition. While Filipino nurses are able to immediately work as personal support workers here in Canada, they have to overcome several obstacles before they obtain the qualification of registered nurse or RN. In between, Filipino nurses have the option to obtain accreditation as registered practical nurse or RPN. Like in the Philippines, Filipino nurses and other healthcare workers here in Canada are at the front in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has highlighted the important role of healthcare workers in society. Canada needs more nurses. Canada needs these nurses even before the pandemic started. But the call for more nurses is louder now, both here in Canada and in the Philippines. The Philippine Post in Canada, composed of the Philippine Embassy in Ottawa and our consulates general in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary, are committed to giving you the necessary assistance so that you may achieve your full potential as professionals here in Canada after you have made the decision to migrate to this country. With this in mind, I initiated the Credentials Recognition in Canada, or CRC project, which is focused on providing this assistance to Filipino professionals in order to transition into Canadian professionals. Our CRC project was launched in June 2021 with 14 action points envisioned to be implemented before the end of this year. I am pleased to share with you some milestones of this project. First, we have coordinated with the Philippine Commission on Higher Education and linking them with the National Nursing Association Service, or NNAS, in order to clarify the academic curriculum followed by nursing graduates in the Philippines. The Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver is assigned to lead this action point. We are hopeful that this clarification will facilitate the assessment of the educational qualifications of Filipino nursing graduates. Second, we note the lack of information available to Filipino professionals wishing to secure recognition of their credentials. with the Philippine Consulate General in Calgary assigned to take the lead. Another action point is to circulate an information brochure to provide a step-by-step guide for Filipino nurses on how to obtain recognition of their credentials. That information, by the way, that brochure may now be downloaded from the website of any Philippine posts in Canada. Finally, the PAOS you are attending tonight is being arranged by the Philippine Consulate General in Toronto, which has been assigned to take the lead in another action point. That is to create greater awareness of the credentials recognition issue and to solicit comments from those affected. And we also hope to provide information on steps by step the Philippine Post in Canada are taking to promote credentials recognition under our CRC project. This is another important milestone, as the issue of credentials recognition can only be better addressed if Philippine Posts in Canada work closely with Filipino professionals affected by this issue. It is my hope that this PAOS will help provide a path for you to work on the accreditation of your credentials if you have not done so, or provide an opportunity for you to share your experience to assist those who follow after you in receiving the accreditation you obtain. I convey our deep appreciation to our resource persons, sharing their time, experiences, and knowledge. And I ask that our participants share with our friends and relatives what they learned tonight at this seminar. Well, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat at maraming salamat sa lahat ng dumalo at sa lahat ng magpapakalat ng lahat ng information tungkol sa seminar na ito ngayong gabi. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Ambassador Robles, for your encouraging words. It truly sets the tone for our PAOS today. And again, it is an honor to have you here with us. Now, I would like to introduce our first speaker for tonight. To discuss the immigration policies in Canada, we have Attorney Maria Dina P. Santos from the Santos Law Office. Attorney Maria Dina is a lawyer in both the Philippines and here in Canada. She is a distinguished scholar and has received a PhD in law from the Osgoode Hall Law School in York University and has established her own legal practice here in Canada. So I would like to welcome Attorney Maria Dina.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, sorry. Good evening, Ambassador, Consul General, Labor Attaché, and everyone else in this meeting. Thank you very much, Ms. De Malanta, for your kind introduction. Okay, so I'm really grateful to have been invited to speak on this topic, which I am very passionate about, having gone through the same process myself. In fact, not just myself, but also my sister who works with me at Santos Law Office. She's now a registered immigration consultant and a licensed paralegal with the Law Society of Ontario. Same with me, I'm now a barrister and solicitor with the Law Society of Ontario. But before becoming such, we went through the foreign credentials recognition process, took courses, exams, etc. Like a lot of you participating in this seminar might be going through. So I just wanted to assure you that you're not alone, that this process, although it can be quite challenging at times, and as Ambassador has mentioned, there are certainly problems, and we're grateful for the very strong support, not just from the Canadian government, but from the Philippine government, that despite having left our homeland, our home country, we still are receiving such great support. So thank you very much for all those initiatives, Ambassador, and the entire Philippine Embassy and the Philippine Consulate. Okay, so now to proceed with my topic, the topic that I was asked to discuss, I would just like to give a brief outline so that you are aware where we're going within the short time that was allocated to me to discuss this topic. So I intend to discuss first the relevant objectives of IRPA, IRPA being the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. This is the law governing Canada's immigration law and policy. And the next topic would be the economic immigration programs of Canada, where foreign credential recognition is most relevant. Next, we will go to this, we'll discuss education credentials assessment, or ECA, which is a very relevant concept in this regard. Okay, and then next we will go to the National Occupation Classification, or the NOC, and then we'll wrap up, of course, with the summary and conclusion. So to the next topic. Uh-oh, it's not moving. Okay, so as I said, Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, or IRPA for short, has a list of objectives for immigration. There are quite several, but the two most relevant objectives are found in Section 3A, which I quote, states that one objective is to permit Canada to pursue the maximum social, cultural, and economic benefits of immigration. So economic benefits, most specifically, the labor market needs of Canada. So they're choosing immigrants based on the needs in the labor market. And second, and more directly, the objective that is found in Section 3J of IRPA, which states that Canadian immigration seeks to work in cooperation with the provinces to secure better recognition of the foreign credentials of permanent residents and their more rapid integration into society. I underline provinces first because it must be noted that immigration is under the federal jurisdiction, whereas the regulation of professions and trades and other occupations mainly fall under provincial jurisdiction. So the Canadian Immigration Department must work in cooperation with the provinces. It cannot just impose its own laws, but must abide by or respect the rules and regulations that are created by the provinces to this end. And also the second term I underlined, permanent residents. That's an important thing to consider because the recognition of foreign credentials process generally applies to permanent residents, because understandably, those who seek to be licensed in their respective professions are in it for the long haul. They intend to practice their professions in Canada, for the long term, meaning you cannot, for example, those who are applying for work permits or study permits cannot invoke or cannot use the fact that they're trying to be licensed in their professions as reason to apply for their temporary residence, namely work permits or study permits. Okay, so that's an important consideration to take note of with respect to the topic of recognition of foreign credentials. Okay, so going to the next topic, the economic immigration programs, which, as I said, is where the recognition of foreign credentials are most relevant. Generally, Canadian immigration are divided in several categories. There's the economic immigration programs, there's the family reunification programs, and there are the refugee and humanitarian classes. So it's under the economic immigration programs that are listed here on this slide, where the recognition of foreign credentials are most important because they're based on the skills, the qualifications of the applicant for permanent residence, that is. Okay. So you'll note here, so the express entry system, I assume most of us are familiar with the express entry system, which is the flagship program of Canada's immigration policies, this is the main entry point for most of the economic immigrants to Canada. They have to meet certain requirements, eligibility requirements, including being qualified in certain occupations. So this include the federal skilled workers, skilled trades, Canadian experience class. And then there's other listed here, but I want to flag the caregiver programs. As we know, a lot of our fellow countrymen, this is a very popular route that they're taking to eventually obtain permanent residence. So note that it falls under the economic immigration programs. Hence, this means that their skills and qualifications would be relevant in applying for this permanent residence category. Okay, so next let's proceed to the term Education Credential Assessment, or ECA for short. This is a topic which frequently arises, of course, in the issue of foreign credential recognition vis-a-vis permanent residence application. So as I said earlier, foreign credential recognition is relevant in the economic immigration categories, primarily because one of the mandatory requirements in applying for these economic immigration programs is the submission of an ECA. What is an ECA? It is simply a document which is used or needed to verify that a foreign degree, diploma, certificate, or some other credential, say an apprenticeship program, is valid and equivalent to a Canadian one. So it has to, this ECA document provides the official equivalency of a foreign credential. Second thing to note about ECAs is that it requires the completion of a foreign credential. So in order to obtain the equivalency of, again, a completed Canadian education credential, whether it's secondary or high school or post-secondary degree or some other qualification. So, which means that if your foreign credential is not completed, say only completed 2 years out of a 4-year bachelor's degree, it is not possible to get an ECA that will equate your credential to a Canadian bachelor's degree. So it will either be returned to you without any assessment or any ECA, or you will be given an equivalency that is a step lower than your foreign credential, meaning a high school or secondary diploma instead of a bachelor's degree, because you did not complete the bachelor's degree. Okay. And lastly, an ECA, of course, will not be needed if your credential was obtained in Canada. Say you obtained a certificate, a diploma, or a bachelor's or a degree in Canada, an ECA is obviously not needed for that. Some people, I just mentioned this, although it seems evident, but some people make the mistake, especially those applying under the Canadian experience class or the recently launched TR to PR pathway, where there was a path for those international graduates. So an ECA is not needed if they completed their credentials in Canada. Okay, so next, going to the next topic. Oh no, this is still related to the ECA. So Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, that's IRCC. This is the official name of Canada's Immigration Department, which implements IRPA, or the Immigration Refugee Protection Act. So they specify, or they designated specific education credential assessment agencies. So you cannot just go to any ECA, to any agency or organization to have your education foreign credentials assessed. It has to fall under one of these 5 agencies listed in this slide. One of the most popular of these is WES, or World Education Services, in our experience, because they're usually fastest and most efficient. But all the other 4 agencies are equally credible and recognized by the Canadian government, although from our experience, some of them take much longer. Okay. And on top of the 5 ECA agencies, IRCC also designated 2 professional bodies for now, only 2, namely the Medical Council of Canada, obviously for doctors, and the Pharmacy Examining Board of Canada for foreign trained pharmacists. Okay, so those are the two. It's expected that more will be added later, perhaps, or some other regulatory body, but we don't know yet for now. Okay, so these are the only designated ECA agencies or organizations that are acceptable for IRC for purposes of applying for permanent residency and meeting the mandatory ECA requirement. Okay, now let's go to the other popular term or acronym being used by IRCC often, which is the NOC, or the National Occupation Classification. Simply put, it is a system to classify jobs and occupations in Canada. And jobs under the NOC are grouped based on the type of duties and the work that a person does. So under Canada's economic immigration programs, they use the NOC to determine if the job offer or work experience that you're invoking as part of your PR application meets the eligibility requirements. For instance, those applying through the express entry must have a job or qualifying occupation that falls under NOC skill level O, A, or B. These are the so-called high-skill jobs. If your job does not fall under these skill levels, then you won't meet the basic eligibility requirements for express entry. Okay, so again, oops, sorry. So again, with respect to NOC, it also is important to note that because right now and in the past several years, IRCC had always been referring to NOC skill level O, A, B, or NOC C and D. NOC O and B being the high scale jobs and NOC C and D being the low scale jobs. But this year, starting 2021, they have changed or overhauled the classification system of the NOC and changed the skill level to tier, or short for training, education, employment, and responsibilities. Other government agencies have started using this NOC version, but IRCC is expected to use this starting 2022. So right now, they're still referring to NOC skill levels O, A, B, C, or D, but next year, they will change into this classification with a little bit more distinction. So instead of the 5 groupings, now there are 6 groupings. So we're not really sure yet how it will affect some of the jobs, but basically the upper tier jobs, 0, 1, and 2 are expected to still be considered high skill jobs. And the lower ones, we don't know about number 3, that's the sort of in between, but there will be similar distinctions like in the past version of the NOC. Okay. So I repeated this slide, but with a slight variation, because this is where you'll see how the NOC is applied. So as I said, in the express entry system, only jobs which fall under NOC O, A, or B, or the so-called high skill jobs, would qualify. But in other programs, such as some provincial nominee classes, the regional and other pilot programs, including agri-food pilot programs, they may include the lower skill jobs or the NOC C and D. Same with TR to PR pathways. This is the very popular program which was launched during the pandemic. A lot of them included the low skill jobs such as PSWs, the frontline workers, and all of that to adapt to the times, because at that time IRCC didn't want to admit PR applicants from outside. So they chose from the pool who are already here, being productive, being helpful. So they added the NOC C and D occupations. And of course, the caregiver programs. Currently, we have the home child care provider pilot and the home support worker pilot. These are NOC C jobs. And so this is where, again, the NOC classification becomes relevant. Okay, so to the next slide. So to wrap up, the Canadian immigration policy with respect to foreign credential recognitions, note and be assured that the Canadian immigration policy does consider and is taking efforts to recognize foreign credentials. It's definitely under radar, but then because of the differences in jurisdiction between the federal and provincial jurisdiction, they have to work hand in hand. and that the requirement of ECAs and classifying jobs under the NOC are part of these efforts to try to recognize to start the process of having PR applicants, prospective PR applicants, credentials be recognized in the Canadian context. So yeah, basically that's it. Because of all these complexities involved, the Canadian government, as well as all stakeholders, including these efforts now by the Philippine government representatives in our country, as well as the settlement agencies which are implementing the foreign credentials recognition programs, are needed, greatly needed, to address the long-standing issues in foreign credential recognition. So that's my presentation. I'll be happy to address questions later on if you have any. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the seminar.
Thank you so much, Attorney Maria Dina, for this thorough and very informative presentation on immigration policies in Canada. Before I continue, I would like to recognize the Philippine Honorary Consul to Winnipeg, Mr. Ronaldo Opina. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Okay, now I would like to introduce our second speaker to discuss the approaches to credential recognition. We have Ms. Connie Manzo. Ms. Connie is an accreditation facilitator with the Accreditation and Qualifications Information Services, or AQIS, of the Welcome Center Immigrant Services in York Region. So Ms. Manzo has over 8 years of experience guiding newcomers and immigrants on pathways to credential recognition, professional certification, and licensing, as well as working in the trades. So welcome, Ms. Connie.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas. Good evening, Ambassador Robles and Conjen Castro and all our other guests, and especially our Filipino kababayan watching now. Okay, so this is just an overview of the different processes and approaches to credentials recognition, to respect the time limit also that we need to present today. So what are credentials actually? So credentials are your international qualifications that include your education. So when we say credentials, it's not only education, but can be a combination of education, experience, skills, and abilities. And what is credentials recognition? It is the process for which your international qualifications and all these credentials are assessed and recognized in Canada. So when you go to Canada, of course, as Attorney Maria Dayan said, there are some requirements of different occupations. And most of you already have some of them, okay? And most of them actually. However, if after the assessment of your previous background and experience, you need to fill some gaps to satisfy the requirements of these occupations, then there are many ways for you to do that. And it depends on the results of the outcomes of your assessment. There are like bridging programs, courses, refresher courses, even some additional exams that you can fill up so that you can meet the standard of the occupations. So just remember that it's not only your formal knowledge that can be evaluated and recognized, it is also the other experience, abilities, and skills. So why do you usually want your previous international qualifications be recognized? Okay, for different purposes. You want your employers to recognize your education skills and abilities, okay, to meet their employment needs. So usually for those who don't need licensing, the recognition of your credentials are usually left to the discretion of the employers. So for example, you apply for a medical assistant job, medical office assistant job, and you were a nurse before, then it is possible that the employer will see that you know medical terminology, you have a compassion for your for patients, and you have good computer skills, and they can employ you if you show that you meet their needs. Okay. Now, for licensing, this is a more straightforward and requirement. You would need to have your credentials recognized to meet the standards of the licensing or regulatory body for regulated occupations. So what are regulated occupations? These are occupations for which you need a license to work in the profession. So when we say license, this is by law, okay? That you need to be licensed in the profession, and you cannot work in that profession without a license. So you need to submit your credentials and see how it can meet the licensing body's requirements. What else can you use credentials recognition for? You can use it to meet admission requirements for post-secondary institutions if you want to study, right? These educational institutions sometimes, for example, need a minimum of education. Some may need a minimum of high school, some may need a minimum of a diploma or degree, and they might need some prerequisite high school courses, right? If you want to study in the healthcare profession, they might need you might need to show that you have a biology or chemistry. And for early childhood educator, maybe they want you to have maybe at least English and math. And the good thing is, if you don't have these in your high school, or if you want to upgrade your skills, many colleges have options for you to get these courses in Canada as part of their alternative ways for you to get admitted. Okay. Now, of course, we heard from Attorney Maria Dian that you also need credentials recognition to apply for immigration, okay, for a status also. So the combination again of your, for some, you just need the education credentials assessment, like for immigration. And also for further education, they might only need your education credentials assessment. Although many college programs and university programs, they have additional requirements like some experience in the field, okay, or English proficiency. So in addition to education requirements. So let's go first and look at your education, right? So as we said, there are a lot of credentials. So what is an education credentials assessment? It is just comparing your international education to Canadian education, okay? So first, it is important to know why you are doing an education credentials assessment, okay? If you want to do it so that you can be licensed in a certain regulated occupation, you need to consult the regulatory body. The regulatory body has many requirements, and education is only the first step. Now, the assessment of your education depends on the regulatory body. So it is important that you understand the requirements of the provincial licensing body, all right? And many regulatory bodies or licensing bodies have partner organizations to do their assessment or this first step for them. As Attorney Maria Dian said, the nurses, right, regulatory body has the NNAS, the regulatory body for lawyers has the ND the Ontario as the Light of Lawyers has another partner agency, okay? And then dentists have the NDEB, medical lab technology has the CSMLS, and for lawyers is the NCA, okay? So they have partner agencies to do the first step education assessment for them. However, education is just the first step. They have other licensing requirements, okay? Now, education credentials assessment, as we said, can also be used for training, education, further education, skills upgrading, bridging programs. However, the type of evaluation required is dependent on the program and educational institution, okay? So you need to consult the program and educational institution to understand the requirements because this will vary, okay? One educational institution or program may need a diploma, minimum diploma. The other one is minimum high school. And then the other one can accept WES and ICAS, while the other one needs a course by course. So it's a little bit different for every educational institution. Another purpose, of course, is for immigration and general employment. So as our previous speaker said, for example, for immigration, be aware what are the acceptable agencies. So usually we have third-party agencies, right? Like WES, ICAS, as it was evaluated before, and the education credentials assessment from immigration, okay? So by the way, my title for this slide, ECA is a little bit like broader than the ECA from immigration. So you can also present this credential assessment of your education. So if your bachelor's degree is equivalent to a bachelor's degree in Canada, or if your diploma is equivalent to a Canadian diploma, you can show that also to your employers and say, my education in my country is equivalent to this education in Canada as evaluated by, you can also mention that in your resume, all right? And your employers may be able to understand more, okay? Because they usually don't know how our education from our country is, how is it related or equivalent to the education in Canada. All right. So for licensing and training and skills and education, you have to know more about the requirements and what is the acceptable credentials assessment that you need. So some licensing bodies and regulatory bodies accept third-party agencies, but most of them don't. Okay. As I just I mentioned before, they have their own way of assessment of your education. Okay, so this is education credentials assessment, and it will be up to these organizations to determine if they recognize it. Okay, if they accept it for their needs, if the employers are willing to hire you, if the licensing body feels that your education is equivalent to the Canadian education for their profession, if the educational institution feels that your education equivalency meet their minimum requirements, and so on. Okay, so this is already mentioned. These are different credentials assessment agencies, and some example reports can be a general assessment of your education. Maybe you can use it for employment. Usually employers don't need to look at your courses. We also have a course-by-course evaluation report for maybe an educational institution who really wants to see that you finish biology, chemistry, English, and math in your high school, all right? Some regulatory bodies also accept the course-by-course evaluation, but you have to be sure which, for your profession, they accept it. So you don't do any credentials evaluation first of your education unless you know what type of evaluation you need. And of course, the ECA report is a different report. If for each of these credentials assessment agencies, they have different requirements, right? And processing, because they will give the report to for immigration. The report is a little bit different. Okay, so the basic process would be there will be an authentication of your documents. So of course, they want to verify if your education documents are correct and authentic, and they might tell one to verify the authenticity, you need to do this. The required documents, you need to have to put a sealed envelope. That doesn't have to be open. So some things like that. Okay. And then they will be compared to Canadian education and see what is it comparable, and they will give you an evaluation or assessment report. So so you can still evaluate incomplete degrees. So if you, as was mentioned, if you have maybe 2 years into a bachelor's degree, maybe in Canada it will be equivalent to a maybe 2-year diploma, or an incomplete bachelor's, or a 1-year college diploma, right? So it's okay. Even if you have incomplete studies, you can still have them evaluated. But usually they only accept formal education. Okay, so for vocational and so if you have a diploma, certificate, or degrees, because there are too many vocational certificates, and they are not able to have the capacity to evaluate for all countries all over the world. So let's now go credentials recognition for regulated occupations. We mentioned about that. So regulated occupations are occupations that need a license to work in the profession or use a protected title. And the credentials recognition is determined by the provincial regulatory body. So just an example, for Ontario, there are 26 health regulated occupations, 13 non-health, and 23 compulsory trades. So compulsory trades may be plumber, electrician, automotive service mechanic. So this is just a rundown of examples for regulatory bodies in Ontario. I am more familiar with Ontario. So these are the licensing bodies. When after you have met the requirements, they are going to give you your license to work. So the professions for registered nurse and RPN, as you said, is College Nurses of Ontario. For architects, Ontario Association of Architects. To use the title CPA is CPA Ontario. You can still work in the accounting field, but not able to use the title CPA. And for engineers, Professional Engineers of Ontario. So, okay, so you need to watch out for that. So the regulatory body defines the requirements. They are responsible for the licensure in the province. So it is not for the whole country, it's only for the province. And they tell us how do we need to evaluate, and what do they need from us, what standards we need to meet so that they can recognize our international credentials and qualifications. So most of the requirements will be, they will compare the education to Canadian, for example, nursing education, law education, physiotherapist education, and so on. Some of the regulatory bodies also require some work standards and practice standards. Now, these standards, work standards, sometimes they accept those from outside Canada, or sometimes they want everything in Canada. But most of the regulatory bodies accept experience from Canada, but of course some have other requirements. For example, for nurses, they may need recency of experience and so on. And it is also possible that regulatory bodies also, some of them are able to evaluate your, for example, education, if you haven't had experience before, and they will tell you the next steps you need to do if they want you to have, if they have work or practice requirements. And of course, there are exam requirements to show that you have met or you understood or you are knowledgeable in the profession. And they also have language proficiency requirements. Okay. Now, when do you apply? You don't have, for many regulatory bodies, you don't have to have everything to apply. Most of them have the minimum education requirements. So if you, for example, for nursing, you need to have a bachelor's degree. If you have RN or RPN, is a 2-year nursing diploma. But I think in our country, we have just the bachelor's degree. So if you think you are eligible to apply, even if you don't have the other requirements yet, then you try to apply for assessment. So the thing is, you need to know if you are eligible to apply and what the licensing process is before you apply. Okay, you need to know the requirement. So you need to find out what are the requirements of your profession. Is your profession regulated or not regulated? If regulated, which provincial regulatory body is responsible for licensure? Which organization is responsible for assessing and recognizing your credentials? What are the licensing and assessment process for international educated professionals, for those educated in the province, for those educated outside of the province? Because as we mentioned, it's provincial. So if you're a nurse educated in Ontario, there will be a process for you. Educated outside of Ontario, but in Canada, there might be a process for you. So the registration requirements standards are the same. The standards are the same. Education, experience, exam, they're the same. But the process on how to apply may be different depending on where you get your education and experience from. So you need to find, if you're internationally educated, find out the process for licensing for internationally educated professionals. And as our ambassador said, some of them can be challenging. So knowing what to expect also will help you determine if you will, hopefully you decide to invest your time, right, and efforts to apply for licensing, which many of us have succeeded actually. And are you eligible to apply for assessment? Can you apply for assessment outside of Canada? So many regulatory bodies are open to this. Even if you don't have status in Canada, you will need them to get the actual license, but to apply for assessment, some of them are fine to start the assessment process. And what documents are required? Remember, there are documents you can submit yourself, but there are also documents which should be submitted directly to the assessment body or regulatory body. And in addition to education and professional qualification, what are other requirements, right? Maybe English proficiency requirements, bridging program, some courses, some refresher courses. Okay, so it's kind of complicated. So, but being aware, right, of what is needed in your profession is important. So I hope you don't compare notes like you say, WES is accepted by a medical lab technologist, for example, by CSMLS. Don't assume that for you, right, for one who is an architect, then WES is also accepted. Okay, so it's very specific to the profession. Okay, so for non-regulated professions, you do not require license to work, and transferable skills and abilities, of course, are important in addition to your education and experience. Now, for some very specific occupations, further training may be required, or professional certifications may be required by some employers. So this is more employer requirements than by law. Okay, the professional certifications. Okay, if there is an employer who is willing to employ you based on your previous background and experience in a non-regulated occupation, then that is okay, right? So for example, just a sprinkling of non-regulated occupations, people usually do two things. While they are pursuing their license, they work in non-regulated occupations. So you can do both. Okay, so we have PT, OT assistant, medical lab assistant, personal support worker. So for example, in Ontario, if you are a health professional, maybe a nurse or a doctor or other eligible medical health professionals, you can apply to be a member of the PSW association in Ontario. And if you are a member, there are some employers who will be willing to employ PSWs as member of that association without having to do a PSW education. On the other hand, because of the recent need for healthcare workers, the government has, some free training, right, for PSWs, for example, in the district school boards. So pharmaceutical sales representative, community service, and bookkeeper, accounting clerk, architectural technologies instead of an architect, project coordinator, construction estimator instead of a professional engineer. Okay, so this is just some examples, for example, of career pathways if you want to become an RPN or RN. So suppose you have a degree in nursing, then you can have your education and requirements evaluated as per the regulatory body of your province. So most regulatory bodies except Quebec, right, use the NNAS to assess the education of nurses from other countries. Once you have been evaluated, then you have a letter of direction, then you fulfill the gaps, competency gaps, and meet the provincial standards and complete other requirements. How about one who has a high school diploma and has the prerequisite courses to enter a nursing program? You can also be a nurse by completing an approved nursing program, 2 years for RPN and 4 years for RN. How about you have a bachelor's degree, maybe a bachelor's in biology, or you are a physician, right? And you are okay to be a nurse, right? There are second entry nursing programs. Instead of 2 years, instead of 4 years, sorry, you can take a second degree. That's why it's called second entry, a second degree. So you only get 2 years instead of 4 years to become a registered nurse. So there are different possibilities depending on what credentials you have previously. So these are just some example pathways. To become a CPA, for example, if you have a degree in accounting, you can have your education and requirements be evaluated. And maybe some of your courses from our country will be accepted, especially the introductory courses in accounting. And you just continue and complete courses and the CPA program in accounting. If you don't have a degree in accounting, you can still become a CPA. Just complete the CPA program, right? Because the requirement, one of the requirements is a degree, plus of course, completing the CPA program. If you have a 2 or 3 year diploma equivalent, then if you want to become a CPA, try to continue into a bachelor's degree, and again, complete the courses in the CPA program, okay? Now, if you don't want to be a CPA and you want to work in accounting, right? Entry-level occupations where your education and experience can be recognized, good computer skills can be recognized, would be accounting clerk, accounts payable, accounts receivable, spare clerk, okay? You can be a bookkeeper too, right? However, if you want to know more about the rules, accounting rules and regulations of your province, then that would be good. You can take some courses which will be accredited by CPA. Maybe in the future you want to be a CPA too. All right. So funding opportunities, there are several. This can change. So we have microloans for immigrants now. For certification, licensing costs, you know, the exams are very expensive, right? Sometimes you want to review for the exams. You need some training, right? Bridging programs. You need to take more courses to become a registered nurse or more courses to become RPN, right? So here are some examples. And there are also employment and job search support programs out there that may help in credentials recognition. In post-secondary institution, it would be best to contact the financial aid office of the post-secondary institution to determine what kind of funding they can give you. There are some bursaries, grants, scholarships, you know, and of course for maybe at least 1 year of education or some certificate programs, diplomas and degrees, you can apply for OSAP. For some bridging programs that can help you with the licensing or to get back into your field, we have the Ontario government has the OBPAP. This is a grant and a bursary that you have to pay back. You just be sure about the eligibility. Most of them might need you to be a permanent resident to help you really integrate to the society. Okay, but some also accept like refugees or convention refugees. So if you want to take a picture, these are general resources to explore if you want to know the occupational profiles of your occupation, what are the regulatory bodies for your province and which is for your occupation, and career planning and trends like what is the job market outlook, what are the usual wages and salary. Okay, so sometimes it also influences the type of plan that you want to do for your career, and some newcomer services. Now, if you need other information on settlement services, like information about government and community services like health, housing, childcare, and everyone. And if you want referrals to these other services like employment and job search, there are so many settlement organizations in your area and your province. Okay, in Ontario, you can explore the settlement.org website. And fortunately, the Philippine Consulate in Toronto has in-house settlement counselors, maybe on a specific day. Particularly, we have Lisel Chavez, which is my colleague at the Welcome Center. And this is her contact information. Okay. So thank you. I hope you learned a little bit. These are just broad strokes of what credentials recognition will look like. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Connie, for that very interesting presentation, especially all the examples you provided on the different pathways. I'm sure it really helps the OFWs we have with us today.
Thank you.
So just a reminder to our participants before we continue, if there are any questions or concerns on the topics that we've already discussed tonight, you can use the chat function below and we will acknowledge the questions during the open forum. I believe we already have one question there. And now for the last topic of the night, we have on credentials recognition for nurses. We have Mr. Rodolfo Lastimosa Jr. from the Council of the College of Nurses of Ontario, or CNO. Mr. Rodolfo is a registered practical nurse working in the respirology and the gastroenterology units at the Humber River Hospital in Toronto. So welcome, Mr. Rodolfo.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me as a guest speaker here in our webinar for tonight. Tonight, I'm tasked to discuss about the credential recognition for nurses, but I will be focusing more on to the credential recognition for nurses here in Ontario, since I'm living here in Ontario. So for a Filipino nurse who wish to become a nurse here in Canada, they must have to check the website of the College of Nurses of Ontario, which is like www.cno.org. And this College of Nurses of Ontario, or we call the college, is the governing body for all RNs, RPNs, and nurse practitioner in Ontario in Canada. So what we actually do as a college is that we fulfill our role by establishing requirement for entry to practice here in Ontario, articulating and promoting practice safe standards for all nurses, administering quality assurance program, enforcing standards of practice and conduct. The college also supports the regulation of nursing in public interest by participating in the legislative process and sharing statistical information about Ontario nurses. For a newly arrived Filipino nurse, they must have to, as I mentioned, they must check the website of the CNO. And in there, they can find how to become a nurse. And in there, they have to choose the international applicants requirements, wherein they will see what are the necessary requirements for them to become a nurse in Canada. But first is, why do they need to register with the college? You have to remember that becoming a member of a college is a legal requirement for anyone who wishes to practice as a nurse in Ontario. It is said there in the website that it is illegal for anyone to practice nursing in Ontario or to call themselves a nurse in Ontario unless they hold a valid certificate of recognition of registration with the college. And here also it mentions about only members of the College of Nurses can practice nursing in Ontario and use the titles nurse or registered nurse, RN, or registered practical nurse, or RPN, or nurse practitioner, or NP within the province. Your status as a registered nurse or RPN assures the public that everyone who identify themselves as nurses in Ontario have gained the knowledge, skill, judgment needed to provide safe and ethical nursing practice. So for those who wish to begin their application, they must first open an account with NNAS, or which stands for National Nursing Assessment Service, or NNAS, which is a national body that starts collecting documents and assessing internationally educated nurses applying to become RNs and RPNs in Ontario. After you open your NNAS account, NNAS will tell you which documents they need to verify your personal information, or nursing education, or nursing registration, and past nursing experiences. Of course, when you make an account for this NNAS, you have also to pay. During my time, like 10 years, I applied for the NNAS like 4 years ago, and I paid like 900 plus US dollars, and I don't know how much is it now. But in there, once you pay for for your account there, they will include documents about forms such as your verification forms for your nursing education, and that includes also your transcript, your course description from the school where you came from in the Philippines. They will also send verification forms for your nursing registration if you are a registered nurse in your country, such as, example, in the Philippines. Then they will also send forms for verification for your employment. So if you are practicing as a nurse in a hospital in the Philippines, you need to submit that form to the hospital or to your employer where you worked before. And also you have to submit a language proficiency. Also, they will also require you to submit your proof of identity, such as passport or birth certificate or driver's license. This NNAS will receive, reviews, and stores all documents that you and others submit. They also ensure your file contains documents that the college requires to determine if you meet the registration requirements. They also ensure that documents are valid and not falsified, and evaluate your education documents against Canadian standards. NNAS also prepares a report about your nursing education, registration, history, and practice, and sends the completed file to the college. In terms of how long will the NNAS completely finish your application depends actually of your school. Like if your school submits all the requirements as the fastest way possible, then your application will also be speed up. Like for example, in my time, I submitted my application. I have to submit within the 3 months of the allotted requirement. So within 3 months, I was already able to submit all my requirements from the Philippines to the NNAS. But actually, they said that it also takes about 6 months because it depends on your school in the Philippines and how long they will submit your applications to NNAS. And after that, once the NNAS has authenticated and verified the required documents and conducted its assessment of your nursing education, you will receive instructions for applying to the college. The college will not start your application process until they receive a request from you to begin the process of applying to register in Ontario. There's also a fee required to begin the registration process. The fee requirements are also posted in the website of the CNO. And there's also a report from NNAS about your nursing education, registration history, and work experiences. By then, the college determines if you meet the specific registration requirement based on the documents you submitted to NNAS. During my time, when all my requirements were submitted to the NNAS, the College of Nurses of Ontario verdict or result was that it was not comparable. So they wanted me to go back to school. The 4 years that we have in the Philippines for your bachelor's degree in nursing is just equivalent to 2 years here in Canada. But at that time, when I arrived here in Canada, I already submitted my RPN. And that RPN requirement, I got eligibility right away. But for my RN, they want me to submit, they want me to go back to school. So that's why I went to school at York University, which I graduated October of 2020. And now I have the eligibility to take my NCLEX. So when you want to finish if you have the result that you have to go back to school, it also here in Toronto, there are 2 schools that you can comply with your bachelor's degree as an IEN, as an international educated nurse. One is York University and one is Ryerson University. For York University, you have to they require only like 50 students per year to complete the 20 months bachelor's degree in nursing. If you want to pursue at Ryerson, before you go to Ryerson, you can first go to Georgetown College for like 2.5 years, and then another 1.5 year for Ryerson. But you can also go straight to Ryerson, depends on of your credentials. And in total, the bachelor's degree in Ryerson is like, including the Georgetown College, is 3.5 years. For York University, is only 20 months. Then once you're a Canadian graduate, then you can already submit and apply for an exam. So you can take your NCLEX exam here in Toronto. So after that one, you have to, once you submit your application and they will say that you're already, for example, if you completed all and you complied and successfully complied your bachelor's degree, then you can apply for your exam. And once you pass your exam, then you have to register already for the College of Nurses to practice as an RN. It is a long process for a Filipino nurse to become a RN here in Canada, but it is actually very rewarding in the end. Based on my experience, it took me like 10 years for me to get the eligibility for my RN, but it's really worth it. Right now, I'm really focusing to become an RN here. It's just that I'm working three jobs right now, so maybe if I have only 2 jobs left, then I can focus on the NCLEX maybe next year. So I think that's about it for my presentation. And if you have questions, just let me know.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodolfo, for that in-depth presentation. May we just ask for you to put the link to the CNO website in the chat so that the participants will have access to that if they require any additional information. Okay, so with that being said, thank you, sir. That brings us to the end of the presentations, and I would like to thank our speakers again for sharing their expertise with us. We will now be starting our question and answer portion of the seminar. If anyone has any questions, I will start reading them out.
Yeah,
and
Christine.
kindly send us a message in the chat.
Yeah, Christine.
Oh.
This is Tony San Juan. Can I ask Rodi a question? Hello, can you hear me? This is Tony San Juan.
Yes, hello, sir. What is your question?
This is about nursing, the nursing profession. Rudy, what's your take now on the equivalency, offhand, the equivalency of nursing graduates in terms of their degree in the Philippines, obtained in the Philippines, compared to the current bachelor's of nursing program in Ontario?
Yes, thank you for that question. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the equivalency of the nursing curriculum in the Philippines and here in Canada, our 4 years nursing in Philippines is just equivalent to 2 years here in Canada, which is equivalent to as an RPN. And if you want to become an RN here, you have to challenge your exam by taking the NCLEX exam, such as they have a requirement called the OSCE, or the Objective Structured Clinical Examination, so that you can take the NCLEX exam, NCLEX RN exam, and you have also to take another written exam or comprehensive exam, so that you can pass. If you can pass it, then you can take the RN NCLEX. You can take the NCLEX exam.
Okay.
Yeah. So
do you know the reasons why it's quite lower? You said we are 2 years behind, or just equivalent only to our RPN. Do you know the reasons?
To be honest, I don't know, because
okay.
even me, I have my master's in the Philippines, but it wasn't recognized here in Canada.
Oh, is that so?
Yes.
Oh, I thought because of the previous educational system in the Philippines, it's 644, while here it's 844, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that's the main reason why, except of course because of the K-12 now,
yes,
the Philippines, but the cohort will start perhaps in 4 years' time yet. The cohort, what I mean, the K-12 educational system. The reason perhaps I would advance is that because of our 644 curriculum, we have 6 years of elementary, while here we have 8 years of elementary, and about 10 years ago we have about grade 13 also. Okay, so we have now here 844. So we are always lacking in terms of curriculum-wise. We lack years, 2 years. So yes, I agree with you that it's quite diminished and we're equivalent only to a sub-professional.
But it's I can also say that it's not also true to all, because there are some nursing graduates from the Philippines who doesn't have their masters or just finished the 4 years. They were given the RN eligibility, so it's actually case-to-case basis.
Oh,
yeah.
Or was it about 10 years ago? Because the nursing graduates from the Philippines are at par with Canadian graduates, because nursing then are offered in community colleges. That was 10 years ago, but not at present.
All right, thank you, sir. I hope that the question was answered. So we do have some questions in the chat, so I will get to those first before I get to the raised hands. So the first question from Ms. Marilyn. So I would like to request a voice recorded session. Miss Marlene, we will be posting these or the webinar on PCG's Facebook page, so you'll be able to access the recordings from there after the webinar.
Oh, thank
and
you.
then we have a question. From Ms. Sherry. May I know if the language proficiency can be waived in BC just like in Ontario with regards to an NAS process? So this might be a question for Mr. Lastimosa.
Yes. So in terms of the English language proficiency, I have a lot of friends who were given whose language proficiency requirements was waived, but it just took so long for the approval of it. As a matter of fact, I have a friend whose requirements is only the English language proficiency, but she waited like for 6 months. But and also based on my experience, because the English language proficiency requirement at CNO, there's a specific score that you have to comply. So for example, in IELTS, you have to get a specific score for your written exam, for your speaking exam, or your listening and your reading exam. So, but during my time, I'm just basing like 10 years ago when I was here in Canada, my English language proficiency was waived because I was working already for 2 years here in Canada. And there are also instances here in like nurses whose language proficiency were also been waived, but it just too long for the process to be fully met.
Can I answer that, Miss Catherine?
Oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the English proficiency language can only be waived with the CNO, but not to other provinces, because I think the question was if the BC regulatory body could waive the English. So they are not. It's only the CNO that do that. And with the English language proficiency, when you start your NNAS, once you open an account within 6 months, you need to provide your English language proficiency that is passing depending on the regulatory body. So, but with the Ontario, with the CNO, you could proceed applying. You just need to check off on your NNS application that you're waiving it through the CNO.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Hello, sir. So your question is next. Would you like me to read it out, or are you
Yes,
comfortable
please.
speaking? Okay, sure. So this question is for Attorney Maria Dina or Ms. Connie. So the IRCC required immigrant applicant to do ECA. However, the designated agencies approved by them are not accepted by some regulatory bodies. The issue is 1, the extra expenses, 2, a false hope for immigrants thinking my education is equivalent as per the agencies approved by IRCC, but not by the regulatory body. And 3, as it is not accepted by my regulatory body, I now need to start from step 1, which delays me to work or practice my profession. How can this be aligned by IRCC to other regulatory bodies that have different agencies for ECA?
Connie, did you want to answer? Or
Oh, yeah, I'll just give my thoughts on it. The ECA assessment or from the third party agencies are assessments of general educational system. Is your bachelor's degree equivalent to a bachelor's degree in the Canadian system based on the university where you came from? But for regulatory bodies, they really look at the content. That's why they even ask you to submit your course descriptions, right, for NNAS. because they will look at the content. So it's not just is your bachelor's equivalent to bachelor's degree, which can happen if you do it from the ECA point of view. But for the nursing, they look at the content of the course. If it, for example, you did anatomy and physiology, it can be from different university, different countries. They want to see the content, right? So regulatory bodies have more like they deep dive on. That's why they are not usually the same, the requirements. Okay, now hopefully maybe in an extension of the CRC project, maybe our embassy can also connect with IRCC, because for now the only acceptable assessment, as Attorney Maria Dian said, was only for pharmacists. The assessment body for pharmacists is the Pharmacy Examining Board, and they accept that. And also for physicians, the initial assessment is the Medical Council of Canada. Hopefully, there can be a link and we can convince IRCC that if you apply for NNAS, NNAS accepts it, then it can be accepted by IRCC. The only problem is it's easy to be accepted by PEBC and MCC. Then the additional is harder to become physician. For nursing, most of the applications are not accepted right away. There are competency gaps. Unless you apply for RPN, there is a chance right away you can be accepted, your education will be accepted. So that's the other issue. Even if we put NNAS, hopefully they accept the education so it can be applied to immigration, right? Because for physicians, as long as you're in the list of the medical directory of schools, they accept the education. But you need to do the residency in Canada. That's why they are not able to be a physician in Canada, because they do not accept the residency from another country. You have to do it again in Canada. So the education part would be easy for immigration purposes, right? For NNAS, there are two issues, right? Hopefully it can be linked. And I'm very happy to note from the chat that new graduates are being accepted as equivalent in education for registered nurses, and so maybe it will be worth an effort if you can convince IRCC to accept the NNAS equivalency or acceptance of your education. Yeah, that would be a good suggestion. I know I know the expenses and the false hope. Yeah, that would be a good, hopefully it will happen, that we will add more assessment agencies accepted for ECA. Yes, Attorney Dian, if you want to add.
Yes, I agree with everything that Connie has said. And I guess part of the complication, again, is because
I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Continue. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the jurisdictional divide between the immigration, which is under the federal jurisdiction, and the provincial jurisdiction over regulation of profession. So it's the basic problem. But not to speak for immigration, I'm not part of IRCC, but to be fair, they have always provided in their information materials, the website, that if your profession or occupation is regulated, that you have to go to the specific regulatory body for the requirements. These requirements that immigration IRCC requires are for immigration purposes to become a permanent resident, but it's not a guarantee that you'll be able to practice your profession. It's always there. Maybe it's just a matter of not disseminating full information to prospective immigrants, but they're aware of this huge perennial problem. We know that very much. So part of what IRCC is doing, so requiring the ECA is just an initial step, as I said earlier, but they also have various programs. They are implementing various programs, one of which is the federal foreign credential recognition process wherein they fund settlement services, information research projects in order to try to find solutions to these problems. So to echo Connie's question to Ambassador, I really got so, I was grateful to hear about your project, the CRC project, and I was wondering, what steps are you taking to coordinate with the Canadian government or even with the provinces in meeting all of these objectives that you have listed in your project, Ambassador?
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that inquiry or question. Our process is really provincial. So there are 10 provinces. So the approaches there are 10 wise. But basically, if you compile the information tonight and the information in different provinces, you go through academic qualifications, you go through experience, you go through clinical experience. Are they compatible or not? So basically, those are the basic rules that they are followed. Of course, you have to consult private associations of professionals like Nurses Association or Architects Association. These are some of the things you go through in this process. But right now, there are the different provinces are in need in different degrees. Some provinces need more nurses, some provinces need more doctors. So the reaction of the provinces will really depend on their need. If they need you, they'll be more lenient in accepting you. But if they don't need you, well, they'll go through the process, go through the mill and see what happens. But as far as proficiency in English, I think when they talk to you, you will already notice. They'll notice how you speak English and explain yourself. So those are the things. These are not just a paper review. This is a review of what you did before in school. And when you compare let's say, the curriculum in the Philippines and here, they don't just look at the subjects. They go deeper into the description of the subject. And then maybe they ask you questions here and there, and they'll find out, is this guy bright? Is this guy dull? Those are the things that come into the picture. It's the whole person that is involved here, not just what school you came from or how you speak English only. It's the whole personality that comes in here. And as I said, in some, let's say, in the maritime area of Canada, they need more medical practitioners. So they have contacted us, and we're now working together to make everything easy for medical practitioners to come in, and that's immigration. And then when they come in, how do they integrate themselves into the practice of medicine? So those are the totality of what we're doing. But as I said, every province have their own approach and their own way of, as a matter of fact, I think the consulate of Toronto has already dealt with some officials granting some financial assistance to those who are applying for nurses. So I think there are 2 other provinces where there are financial assistance. All these things we're trying to package them and have 10 packages for all the provinces. Yeah, so these are not simple. These are not questions you answer with simple sentences. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Ambassador. Due to time constraint, we will, all those who have submitted their questions, we will direct them to our speakers, and later on we'll request them to reply to you directly. So we would like to thank again, first and foremost, His Excellency Ambassador Rodolfo D. Robles for gracing our post-arrival orientation seminar. Thank you very much again, sir. And also our resource speakers, and we are presenting them certificates of appreciation for their wonderful and informative, excellent presentation. So we have them now. These are the certificates to be given respectively to Mr. Rodolfo Lastimosa Jr., Attorney Maria Dina Santos, and Miss Maria Concepcion Manso. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much to you all. Before we close, can we have some few words, Sir Amba?
All right. Thank you, Ron. This CRC project of the embassy of being taken care of by the four consuls general who are helping very assiduously in doing their part of the work. I am grateful to them, and but this is my principal advocacy, because I saw how nurses who are experienced in the Philippines with some honors in school are treated here as assistant nurses, and it pains me that a Filipino who is more qualified is assisting somebody who graduated 2 years ago. This is really what prompted me to propose or to launch this CRC project of our embassy here in Canada. Thank you very much, Ron. And I enjoyed everyone who has some knowledge or experiences to please contact your consulate and give us some information or experience which you think will be helpful in proceeding with our project. Thank you again.
Thank you very much again for your kind words, sir, and your wisdom, and for leading this excellent project, the Credentials Recognition in Canada project. Thank you very much again, sir, for giving priority to our fellow Filipinos, and to our speakers and sa ating mga kababayan, community leaders, and our very own partner, our labor office led by our labor attaché, Attorney Rachel Sosobrado, and of course, our welfare officers is around, Welfare Malu Reyes. And I would like to thank everybody, no? And most especially our MC tonight, Ms. Castle. Thank you very much for steering the boat, the ship tonight. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. At magandang gabi po.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank
evening and
you.
good weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy
Have a good
weekend,
night.
everyone.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, all of you.
Bye. Thank you.